Hello, and welcome to From Grief to Purpose, where we take life's hardest moments and turn them into something greater. I'm your host, Nina, and together we're going to get into the real depth about loss, healing, and finding a deeper divine purpose. Whether you've lost someone, something, or even yourself, this is the place where we keep it real, find hope, and walk that journey out together. Are you ready to journey this journey together? Well, let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the From Grief to Purpose podcast, formerly That Dose of Encouragement podcast. And if you missed the explanation about the shift in which I'm heading with the direction of this podcast, please go back and listen to the previous episode, and it will give you the why behind the shift and get you caught up. But today, listen, as always, first off, I'm your host. Before I get too far ahead of myself, I am your host, Nina, and I'm here, friends, to help us navigate the tough journey of grief. Why? Because we need to have conversations about grief, okay? We're going to talk about the grieving process so that we can find our way to a more meaningful life. I know what it feels like to experience loss. I have been through it myself. And I'm telling you, it can leave you feeling lost and without direction. But there's a but. I also believe that even in our pain, we can discover a deeper and greater purpose. So my mission is to support you, to support us in finding that purpose, even when it feels like it's impossible, even when it feels like you don't want to show up for this journey. We're going to walk this walk out together, okay? We're going to walk it out together so that we can uncover the hope that's waiting for us on the other side, okay? Because I believe that God has wonderful and beautiful things for us ahead. So today we're going to dive in. We're going to dive into a topic that hits close to home for many of us, and it is the 5 stages of grief, as laid out by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross to be exact. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, I'm so sorry, I'm butchering her name, but she was a Swiss, I can't talk today, you guys. Listen, she was a Swiss-American psychiatrist, and I'm actually reading her book currently. The book that I'm reading from her is a groundbreaking book on death and dying. And let me tell you, it's deep. It's good. It's deep. I'm not saying go purchase the book. I'm not even recommending the book. I'm just saying this is where I'm speaking from, is from her research on the 5 stages of grief. So for me, this book was a definite must read. And once I finish it, I will tell you all about it through the podcast episodes as we go along. So stay tuned. But on her, the work that Dr. Kubler-Ross did, it gives us insight into not just what the dying experienced. That's why I wanted to just read this book, but it also gives us insights is how we as loved ones, caretakers, and just human beings, process the grief of losing someone. So once again, she goes into depth with more research. It's a definite read. If you want to gain more perspective on her book on death and dying, be sure to pick it up, go online, shop for it. I'm not going to drop the link or anything like that. But let's move forward because I don't want to get into too much depth about her book, but I'll talk about it again in later episodes. So now today's episode, we're going to focus specifically on grieving the death of a loved one. Again, future episodes, I'm going to be talking about it all because once again, grief is basically a significant loss. When you've grieved or you're grieving or you're in the grief process, you're grieving something or someone, right? And so today we're focusing on the death of a loved one. And let's just keep in mind as we're going along in the podcast, I want you to keep in mind one thing, that grief looks different for everyone. Grief looks different for everyone. So I want you all to get the thought process out of your mind that, so you should grieve a certain way, or somebody that you know should be grieving a certain way, or someone that you know should be over it by now. They should get over it. They should move on. They should have stopped grieving by now. My question to the latter part, they should stop grieving, or they should have stopped grieving by now. My question to you would be, or to that person would be, did they grieve at all? Did they go through the process of, grieving? Did they cry? Did they, get sad? Did they heal through it in a healthy way? That would be my question. Because before you can move on, before you can quote unquote get over it, and that's not a thing, and please don't use that statement. If you've used that statement to anyone, that's not healthy, number one. But uh, you can't get over something that you never experienced in the first place. You cannot get over grieving someone when you never grieved that someone. So it's very important to grieve. Grief is a natural process. It is a very natural experience of emotions that I believe one must do in a healthy way in order to be able to accept that the loss has occurred, it has happened, excuse me, and it is okay to move on. It's okay. So we're going to go through the stages. We're going to take our time, and we're going to go through each stage. Now, the 5 stages of grief, we're going to break them down. We're going to break down each stage so that we can understand or gain an understanding of this framework a little bit better. So the 5 stages are denial. And again, we're talking about these particular 5 stages, the Kubler-Ross stages of grief. The 5 stages are denial. That's 1, anger. 2, 3, bargaining. 4, depression. 5, acceptance. We're going to explore these stages, and we're going to explore how they show up in our lives and after loss. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Now, the denial stage, and excuse me, I'm going to try my best, you all, not to stutter during this particular episode. I have my bottled water here somewhere. My mouth is so dry. But during this particular stage, the first stage being denial, this is that stage where, it's the feeling that when you first hear that someone close to you has just passed away, and it just does not feel real. It has not sunk in. It does not feel like it has happened. It has not hit your reality yet. That's denial. Your mind cannot fully process it during this stage. Your mind cannot fully process the weight of what's happened. So you begin to put up this mental block. You find yourself thinking, this can't be true. You think thoughts like, there's no way that this happened. There is no way on this earth, in this world, there is no way that this is happening to me. So that's denial in a just. And again, I'm going to keep it very basic. I'm not going to overload us with over explanation of each stage. I want us to gather the basics of the 5 stages of grief, and we're going to continue to break them down throughout the process here and there. But today we're just going to keep it basic and I'm going to give you some small examples of each as well. So in the denial stage, for example, let's go with the loss of a parent, right? Like how I shared in the previous podcast with the loss of my parents. So with the loss of a parent, for example, and for days or even weeks after the funeral, you might catch yourself picking up the phone to call them. Denial, right? It's like your brain hasn't caught up yet with the reality yet. Anytime it's like something in the form of how you react being, this can't be true. There's no way that this is happening, but yet you're still operating as if they're here. You're in denial. And it's because, or I should say, it's not because like you're avoiding the truth intentionally. It's just a defense mechanism. Like your brain puts up this defense mechanism, a self-defense mechanism. And you just begin to, or your mind begins to try to protect you from the initial shock of loss. Because with denial comes shock, or shock comes first and then denial of the loss, because your brain cannot fully comprehend what has just taken place. So now number 2, let's go into anger. Anger is our next stage. And this stage is where we start asking those why questions. Why them? Why now? Like, why now in this moment in time, in this moment in my life? Why? Why did this have to happen? Why did this have to happen to me? And you can feel angry at anything in this particular stage. You can feel angry at everything at this particular stage, from yourself to other people, even God, right? That anger might seem irrational to some, or even feel irrational to you as you're trying to, organize your emotions or thoughts or make sense of things. But it's a real feeling. It's a real emotion. It is going to show up. It may not show up, but it is a real emotion that some often um, experience during their grieving process, or the loss of that loved one. So, for example, with the loss of a loved one, or let's say even a sibling, you can find yourself like snapping at friends or family for even the smallest things. Some of the examples, especially during times of loss or funerals, before funerals, after funerals, because people are operating in this emotion and anger. You might even find yourself when someone says to you, that's just a person trying to console you, a family member trying to console you, or say some nice words to you, things like, "Oh, well, they're in a better place," and all of a sudden that kind phrase, or supposed to be a kind phrase that was extended to you, you find yourself just going off, or it sets you off. The truth is, with this particular emotion, you're not mad at that person. You're not mad at them, the individual. You're just mad at the situation. People that operate in this anger, or it comes out as anger, they're not mad at you, especially if you're on the receiving end of anger from someone that's grieving. They're mad at the situation because they cannot control the loss. And so they're angry, and they have to be angry at something. So oftentimes this is projected at those that are closest to you. So you're mad at the loss, the person that is grieving, because you feel like this is unfair. The unfairness of it all is what's hitting you. So it's important to really acknowledge this stage. This stage is, though, how should I say this? It's important to acknowledge the stage, though, because suppressing the anger won't make it go away. Oh, let me say it like that. Suppressing is not going to make it go away. It's still going to be there. The fact that the loss has occurred, it's happened, right? Once again, we said death is final. There is no getting the person back. As much as we want, as hard as we pray, that loved one is not coming back. So it's okay to feel, it's okay to feel, it's okay to feel the emotion of anger, to address what it is, to say what it is. It's what it is. You're angry. So now our next stage is the bargaining stage. Now in the bargaining stage, in the bargaining stage, this stage is interesting because this is where oftentimes those that are grieving, will try to make deals, usually with God or ourselves. Bargaining sounds like, if only I had done this differently, maybe they'd still be here. Or, God, if you bring them back, I will change everything. I will give my life to you. I will do better. That's the bargaining. It's almost like we try to negotiate our way out of grief because we don't want to feel, we don't want to experience, we don't want to accept, right? So, for example, like losing a spouse. And I always go back to the example of my father, right? We as the children, we lost our mother, but my father, my dad, he lost his wife, he lost his spouse. And so that's two different experiences. And then with their relationship and their history, because my mother and my father's history, they go all the way back, like way before high school. So they grew up together, and essentially. And so they have years together. So imagine having to unpack that, all of those emotions, just that time that you spent with that person. You, the spouse that's left here, you've lost your spouse, someone that you had dreams of growing old with. You have dreams of watching your children get married and, have children, and then watching your grandchildren. You might replay every conversation because your emotions are so, and thoughts are just all over the place, consuming you, trying to consume you at this stage with guilt. You begin to replay every argument or every decision in your mind, everything that you thought, every word that you spoke, the last words that you spoke. What did I say? I hope I said, did I tell them I love you? Like what? If only, the if onlys come at this stage. Like, well, if only I would have known that they were sick earlier. If only we had gone to the doctor sooner, they'd still be here. But in this particular stage, the reality of it is we often just feel guilty in the bargaining stage. And that's why all of that comes out, during this particular stage. And it's so important. And that in this particular stage, it's hard to do. That's why yourself or by yourself sometimes, especially if you're not in a place of healing, meaning you know some of the healing work that needs to be done. You're able to walk yourself a little bit through a journey towards a way to grieve in a healthier way. This is just how during this time, I should say, or during this time, it's very important just to remind yourself that there's no negotiating death, right? We cannot negotiate death. It's a part of life's cycle. Although we want our loved ones to be here forever, with us forever, but that's not reality. The reality is we all have an expiration date. Unfortunately, some of our expiration dates come sooner or too soon. Some come tragically. And this is just a very hard thing to understand for our mind sometimes to understand, for our human spirit to understand. But although it's hard, it's something that we have to grasp and move towards, in a very, stepped out way that is a step-by-step process in a very healthy way, hopefully guided by either a life coach that offers grief coaching like myself or a therapist, or within a community. Like I know a lot of churches, I know my church offers grief support. So grief support types of, support groups. So it's very important that you surround yourself with people that are going through the same thing that you're going through or have the tools and are equipped to support you along your journey. It's like having that protective fence, around you, barricading you in so that you are safe and in a safe environment where you're able to release all of these emotions in a healthy way, or your words that you need to release in a healthy way so that you can be able to express what you're going through. Now, the fourth stage we're going to get into is depression. Now, this stage, unfortunately, but it's a very real reality for a lot of people. This is one of those stages that hits the hardest for a lot of people. Depression is where the weight of the loss really sinks in. And, you feel numb. You can feel numb during this particular stage. You can feel disconnected, or you can even feel like the world, in a sense, is moving on without you. I can remember, and again, I shared in a previous podcast, the one before this one, go back and listen to it. But I've experienced all of these stages. Okay. Once again, have lost both of my parents, myself and my siblings. So these, stages are not new to me. I'm thankful that I have the language to communicate what I experience now. But of course, back then, especially with the loss of my mother, I had the slightest idea what I was going through. I just knew that I had experienced a loss, but I did not know how to communicate what I was dealing with, the emotions that I was experiencing then, and how to place them. What should I do with them? How to talk through them. So it's very important that we understand what it is about each stage that may show up for us. Once again, like depression, it's the numbness, the being disconnected, feeling like the world is moving on without you. And this stage isn't just sadness. I want us to get an understanding about that. Depression is not just sadness, it's deeper than sadness. It's like, it's a deep, soul wrenching grief that can feel like it's never going to end, like there is no light at the end of the tunnel. So if you can imagine, for an example, for this particular one, like the example of, think about someone that has lost a child, if you've lost a child, but losing a child and that impact and how that can hit you hard, that can send you to a depression. Especially for be it a mother or a father, but just imagine losing a child. I can only speak from a woman's standpoint, and birthing your child. And then after you have birthed this child suddenly, loses their life. So the impact of this loss, you might feel yourself staying in bed with depression, not wanting to talk to anyone or do anything. The energy oftentimes to even go on just doesn't seem to be there anymore. Like you cannot find it. You cannot pull yourself together when depression has set in. Of course, depression is natural in saying that it is a natural emotion. It is something that may show up. It's not something to, of course, overly concern yourself with if you have experienced a loss, and I don't want you to be in a mindset of, well, I need to expect anger, depression. Don't do that to yourself. We're just going into each. So if you have experienced a loss, if you're doing some self work, if you're doing back work, like I had to do some self work on myself where I had to go back and understand what I actually experienced. I had to find an understanding and gain an understanding of all of my emotions so I can make sure that I'm showing up as the healthy version of myself at this age and stage and season of my life. But it's natural. So this is a natural emotion, but it's also where I want to encourage you, if you find yourself in a depressed state, to reach out for help. And that help is, you need to go see a therapist. You need to surround yourself with healthy individuals, healthy people that are encouraging you, checking on you, someone that you can talk to if you're not ready for a therapist, or a grief coach like myself. And again, I offer coaching services. I'm a life coach that offers coaching services in the area of grief and purpose empowerment. But you need to reach out for help. Do not isolate yourself in this particular stage. Even though it feels like it's the easiest option, it's so easy, when you have gone through a very significant, gut wrenching, soul wrenching type of loss. And that's how it feels for you. it feels like, no, I want to stay in the bed. No, I'm not going outside. You gotta get up from that. You got to find that itty bitty, you know, amount of energy. Take that phone call when someone is calling you, get up and reach out for help. Why? Because there is more in this life in store for you. And that loved one that you lost does not want you to live the rest of your life in depression. All right, so we're going to go to the next stage, the final stage, friends. And again, the final stage of this particular discussion, not saying that this is the final stage of grief and all the emotions that you will experience, but we're going to talk about acceptance. So this is stage number 5. So we're finally here. We have acceptance now. Now, this particular form and how we're using this word or the stage of grief, it doesn't mean that you just suddenly, just all of a sudden you're just okay with the loss or that you are just over it. That's not what this means. It's that, and I want to make sure I'm breaking it down as basic as I can. It just basically means that's not what acceptance is about. I accept it, right? But it also means that I'm just ready to come to terms with the reality of the situation. You've accepted that this person is gone, okay? And while it still hurts, because it will hurt, you'll still experience that emotion. You've started to figure out, though, how to live without them in a healthy way. So to go back, on that hurt, you're going to experience hurt. There's no end date to, okay, after, I've grieved. I feel like I've grieved. I'm done. I'm good. You're still going to reflect back and you're going to remember and, you're going to start remembering times and places and things you did with that person and the moments that you had, and hurt will begin to set in. Sometimes the sadness will come back about it, or, the happy times, will come back where you're not always sad, because there's some good moments to also reflect on. So don't beat yourself about that either. But again, that's why it's very important to surround yourself with a healthy community, to seek therapy, to make sure that you are even getting involved with grief support groups if you can. I know that there are a lot of communities that do host grief support groups, to include myself. I know that church communities host grief support groups and so forth. So you got to get into community and begin to surround yourself with people again. If you have began to isolate yourself, come out of that isolation, come out of that depression. Let's begin to work our way out of the depression, okay? And begin to make sure we're surrounded by the right people, the right community, healthy people, and getting into those spaces as far as therapy so that we can be able to talk. You have to talk about the process, begin to open up and share about what you're going through. So here is the thing as we're transitioning. Actually, let me go. I'm going to go back for just a minute. No, you know what? I'm going to leave it right there. So, okay, here's the thing. These stages are not linear. Just want to make sure I reiterate that these stages are not linear, meaning they are not in any particular set order. So I went through the stages. There are 5 stages, right? They were not in any particular order, meaning that, okay, during the grieving process, you have to start with denial. Then you need to go to anger. Then you must go to bargaining. Then you have to go to depression. Then you must go through the acceptance stage. No. Again, when you're grieving, when you have gone through a significant loss, that process is going to look totally different, 100% different to everyone. It's going to be different for everyone, excuse me. So do not try to place them in an organized manner. You may experience all of the stages and you may experience one stage. You may experience 2 stages. But just be sure that you are grieving in a healthy way. Number 1, be sure that you do grieve, because again, it's natural. It's a very natural process. You should grieve. And be sure that you're grieving in a healthy way, because you don't go through denial one day and then anger the next, followed by bargaining and so on. So again, there's no order to the process, but be sure to grieve. Now, I just want to also reflect back on just the portion that you, or the fact, I should say, that you might, this is the part you want to give yourself grace. You might jump between stages and feel like you're stuck or in one stage for a long time. Again, there's no expiration dates or set dates or laid out map and how you should grieve, when you should grieve, and when it should expire. I would suggest, of course, you don't want to stay in the grieving process for the rest of your life. I would hope not. Let's not grieve forever. Let's not grieve too long. What is too long? That's determined up to the individual. But you need to recognize those self red flags within yourself. Am I isolating? Am I angry? Have I been angry for 10 years? Although the death of that person, the loss of that individual happened, 10 years ago. Am I still in these emotions? And have I sought the proper help that I need to walk me through what I'm experiencing? So there's also many more stages too of the grief process that can be experienced than just these particular 5. Just to add that as a note, and that's because grief is complex, you all. Grief is a very complex process of emotions. And again, there's no one's journey, though, is exactly the same. No one's journey is going to be the same. So give yourself grace, allow yourself to feel the emotions, understand what they are. Journal, journal your process, write it out, talk it out, go get counseling, and so forth, or coaching. So now in the next episode, I just want to give you a little pre-insight. We're going to dive into grieving the loss of relationships. We got some good episodes coming up for you all. We're going to get into it because, again, grief is a significant loss. So whether it's the loss of jobs, self, relationships, but we're going to talk about relationships and the grieving process of losing, of the loss of a relationship, be it a breakup, a divorce, or even an estrangement. So that's a whole different topic. And again, we're getting to that on the next particular episode. So be sure to tune in, because that's the question. Do you, or did you grieve your last relationship? Did you grieve the divorce that you went through? Did you grieve the breakup, or did you just carry on as business as normal? Next relationship, we're going to talk about it. Okay. We're going to talk about it because we need to have these conversations. So before I wrap up, friends, on today, my prayer is, first of all, that you all learn something, that we learn something, that I have been a help to you all. If so, please be sure to leave me a comment, send me an email. I also want to extend an invitation to anyone out there who feels like they're drowning in grief. You don't have to go through your process alone, okay? I offer grief and purpose empowerment coaching for people just like you and just like me. So I've been there, okay? I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. I have experienced loss significantly many times over. And I understand, people just trying to find their way through the pain and just trying to rediscover their purpose on the other side of this particular season of life. So if you need support or guidance, feel free to reach out to me. You can find all of my details for a free consultation, because I want to give you a free consultation so that we can talk. I can get to understand what it is that you need, how I can support you as a grief coach in the area of grief and coaching you through your process. Please head over to www.thatdoseofencouragement.com. That is my website. I will leave it in the description. Of course, it'll be there for you all in the little mini description bio, so that we can just work through your grief together. And just help you move forward. Okay. I'm going to help you move forward with purpose. and towards purpose and towards a greater purpose, because God has there's greater, okay, for us. I don't want you stuck in grief. I don't want you stuck in isolating yourself. I don't want you stuck in depression, any of that. I don't want you stuck in grieving, and I don't want you grieving too long. You don't have to. You don't have to grieve too long. So thank you all. Am I out of breath? I don't know. Listen, thank you all so much for tuning in today. Remember, grief is not something that you have to carry by yourself. And until next time, friends, take care of yourself. Please take care of yourself, especially if you are grieving the loss of a loved one, if you are just now learning how to grieve the loss of the loved one that you lost. And I'll see you guys next time. All right. Bye.